here at a situation where Paul was traveling and he was being followed. He said he came upon a woman, a damsel, it describes here, possessed with a spirit of divination. What is that? She was a fortune teller, a soothsayer. She was of a demonic means. She was possessed with the spirit of the devil so that she could tell the future, tell fortunes, and tell what was going to happen in the coming days. Now she was being used by the men of that community for their gain. They were using her, asking her through the power of Beelzebub, the power of Satan that was within her. They were calling upon her to give them information that would allow them to have gain in their business. Now they were walking in the darkness. A lot of folks say, well, preacher, I want to touch on this just for a second. Go down the highway and you see some big palm someplace and it says palm reading, leaf tea readings. I'm going to tell you what Christians need to do. You don't need to be a part of none of that. Drive right on by. Don't say, well, I need to find out a few things. This is a good godly lady. You know, I've heard people say they stopped and they didn't even pray. They'd say all kinds of things, but right here the word says it's a spirit possessed of the devil, and Paul encountered this. They were using this for their gain. That's the way Satan works. But Paul came and this lady was following him, and she began, says the spirit, that Paul was grieved. And he turned and said to the spirit, I command thee in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And what happened? The word says he came out the same hour. And here's where the problem really began. When her masters, who were gaining through her spirit of the devil, saw that the things were over, they became absolutely angered at Paul. He broke up the gig. Listen, through the power of Jesus Christ, some things had stopped. They were no longer going to gain money through the works of the devil. And Paul was going about his way. Since they brought them to the magistrates and they said, these men, these two right here, these guys, they do exceeding trouble within our city. You guys got to do something with them. Now, we talked this morning, Paul knew the consequences. Paul knew exactly, because Paul had been on the other side of the fence. He'd been the guy persecuting, and he knew what would come his way. These guys took him here as we continue on in the Word. They accused him of everything. They caused trouble. They teach customs which are not our customs. They're not lawful to us, being Romans. The multitude, they began to rise up against him. They began to scream and they began to yell, make accusations. So the magistrates did what they felt they had to do. What they did, they whipped them, took their clothes off of them, and they strapped them. They whipped them. Think about that. What a persecution. You as a Christian, someone calls you up and they pull you before a council and they make allegations and they determine you're going to be whipped and put in prison. You know, we here in America, we've never encountered anything like that. You go around this world today, there's places you go as a Christian and just, guess what? They'll take your life. They'll cut your head off and they'll video every bit of it, and it's a prize. I beheaded a Christian. You know, I was reading the other day out in, was it Oregon, where this mass shooting happened, and this deranged killer walked in and he began to ask people if they believed, if they were Christians. You know, we talked about that. How would you feel? How would you react? How would you respond? With a man with a gun, and you just seen him kill someone beside you, and he walks up and says, now, you tell me, are you a Christian? Whew. Think about that just for a minute. That's what's coming to this country. When someone will walk in and say, if you're a Christian, you're going to die today. Well, I think what the Word tells me about living and dying. To live is what? Talks about living and having Christ, but to die is what? Gain. To die is gain. I'll tell you what, I know the next steps that I'll make will be on the streets of gold. But these men were facing that the persecution that Paul was encountering. They were making these things, accusations their way. And they took them and they began to whip them. And they laid many stripes on them, and then they said, let's put them in the prison. Not just in the prison cells, but they went to the innermost, worst part of the jail. Most of us don't know anything about jail. I worked in the jailhouse for just a few months one time. Real education I got. You know, I remember in this old jail they had cells on the outside, and in the center of the jail they had one big cell. And I always remember that when I worked most of the time was in the evening, afternoons. And the jailer, the main deputy jailer would be gone. It would be several of us there, and they would always tell us this instructions when they leave. You do not open that door for anything. I didn't have a problem with that. I said, don't even get the keys next to me. I ain't going to be tempted. Do not open that, because in the innermost part of that jail was the worst part. Some of the worst men. Some of the worst that were convicted. Some of the worst that had done some of the baddest things. And they were there for a reason in that center section, the innermost part. Well, they took Paul and Silas not just